Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in today. This is the Bodega Cat Book Club Spiritual Edition. And today we're continuing our reading of Flow by Mihaly C. I call him Mr. C because I don't know how to pronounce that name. I don't even want to try. It just looks too weird for me. Okay. So this book was inspired by an animated film that I saw with my friend Marina. Shout out to Marina. And it was based on the same name. The animated film is also named Flow. I don't think it has anything to do with this book, but I thought it would be interesting to read it. Mm. And yeah, check out our other book clubs. We have on Mondays we got the spiritual book club, which is what this book fell under, spiritual edition. We also have the health book clubs on Wednesday, which we are starting a new book on in August. So you could check that out in our website under the fun stuff tab. The book club is under that. And then on Thursdays, we have the financial book club, which we read about financial books. And incidentally, the spiritual book club, spiritual edition, will be starting a new book as well on in August. So check that out too. I have intro videos on the new books, and you can check that out. And I hope you join us. And check out our website, check out our center, check out our merch. So, okay, that's the extent of advertisement that I'm going to do. Okay. All right. So, we will be reading chapter 9, and as you can see, there are some parts that I have highlighted. That means there is a footnote in the back of the book, which we will be reading as well. Okay. All right. So, this is chapter 9, and this will be part 1. And let's get right to it. Cheating chaos. Oh, okay. Let me move the camera in a little bit. You guys can follow us with your book if you have a book. If you don't, you could follow us here with, oops, sorry, too much, Christina. If you don't have a book, you could follow us here on the camera. Okay? All right. Despite everything that has been said so far, oh, maybe a little bit closer. I don't know if you guys can see it. Yeah, how about that? Oh, maybe not. Okay. Okay, despite everything that has been said so far, some people may still think that it must be easy to be happy, as long as one is lucky enough to be healthy, rich, and handsome. But how can the quality of life be improved when things are not going our way, when fortune deals us an unfair hand? One can afford to ponder the difference between enjoyment and pleasure if one doesn't have to worry about running out of money before the end of the month. For most people, such distinctions are too much of a luxury to be indulged in. It is okay to think of challenges and complexity if you have an interesting, well-paying profession, but why try to improve a job that is basically dumb and dehumanizing? And how can we expect people who are ill, impoverished, or stricken by adversity to control their consciousness? Surely they would need to improve concrete material conditions before flow could add anything appreciable to the quality of existence. Minimal experience, in other words, should be regarded as the frosting on a cake made with solid ingredients like health and wealth. By itself, it is a flimsy decoration. Only with the solid base of these more real advantages does it help make the subjective aspects of life satisfying. Needless to say, the whole thesis of this book argues against such a conclusion. Subjective experience is not just one of the dimensions of life, it is life itself. Material conditions are secondary. They only affect us indirectly by way of experience. Flow and even pleasure, on the other hand, benefit the quality of life directly. Health, money, and other material advantages may or may not improve life. Unless a person has learned to control psychic energy, chances are such advantages will be useless. Conversely, many individuals who have suffered harshly end up not only surviving, but also thoroughly enjoying their lives. How is it possible that people are able to achieve harmony of mind and grow in complexity even when some of the worst things imaginable happen to them? That is the outwardly simple question this chapter will explore. In the process, we shall examine some of the strategies people use to cope with stressful events and review how an autotelic self can manage to create order out of chaos. Tragedies transformed. It would be naively idealistic to claim that no matter what happens to him, a person in control of consciousness will be happy. There are certainly limits to how much pain or hunger or deprivation a body can endure, yet it is also true, as Dr. Franz Alexander has so well stated, quote, the fact that the mind rules the body is, in spite of its neglect by biology and medicine, the most fundamental fact which we know about the process of life, end quote. Holistic medicine and such books as Norman Cousins' account of his successful fight against terminal illness and Dr. Bernie Siegel's description of self-healing are beginning to redress the abstractly materialistic view of health that has become so prevalent in this century. The relevant point to be made here is that a person who knows how to find flow from life is able to enjoy even situations that seem to allow only despair. And there's a footnote about Dr. Alexander. Oh, okay. So the entire section to page 198, 198. Oh, okay. The section that we're reading, it kind of goes on for another couple pages, a few pages. So that entire section draws heavily on interview transcripts made available to me by Professor Massimini. I translated the Italian answers into English. And then the quote by Franz Alexander was cited in Siegel, 1986, page 1. Norman Cousins' strategy for controlling his illness is described in his Anatomy of an Illness, 1979. Yeah, that might be a book that the book club can read too, because that's a pretty popular um, famous book, Anatomy of an Illness. So I don't know. We'll check it out. We'll see. Okay. Rather incredible examples of how people achieve flow despite extreme handicaps have been collected by Professor Fausto Massimini of the Psychology Department of the University of Milan. One group he and his team studied was composed of paraplegics, generally young people who at some point in the past, usually as a result of an accident, have lost the use of their limbs. The unexpected finding of this study was that a large proportion of the victims mentioned the accident that caused paraplegia as both one of the most negative and one of the most positive events in their lives. The reason tragic events were seen as positive was that they presented the victim with very clear goals while reducing contradictory and inessential choices. The patients who learned to master the new challenges of their impaired situation felt a clarity of purpose they had lacked before. Learning to live again was in itself a matter of enjoyment and pride, and they were able to turn the accident from a source of entropy into an occasion of inner order. Lucio, one of the members of this group, Lucio, I think that's how you pronounce it in Italian, right? Lucio. One of the members, sorry if I butchered it, One of the members of this group was a 20-year-old happy-go-lucky gas station attendant when a motorcycle accident paralyzed him below the waist. He had previously liked playing rugby and listening to music, but basically he remembers his life as purposeless and uneventful. After the accident, his enjoyable experiences have increased both in number and complexity. Upon recovery from the tragedy, he enrolled in college, graduated in languages, and now works as a freelance tax consultant. Both study and work are intense sources of flow. So are fishing and shooting with a bow and arrow. He is currently a regional archery champion competing from a wheelchair. These are some of the comments Lucio made in his interview. Quote, when I became paraplegic, it was like being born again. I had to learn from scratch everything I used to know, but in a different way. I had to learn to dress myself, to use my head better. I had to become part of the environment and use it without trying to control it. It took commitment, willpower, and patience. As far as the future is concerned, I hope to keep improving to help breaking through the limitations of my handicap. Everybody must have a purpose. After becoming a paraplegic, these improvements have become my goal, my life goal. Unquote. Franco is another person in this group. His legs were immobilized 5 years ago, and he also developed severe urological problems requiring several surgical operations. Before his accident, he was an electrician and he often enjoyed his work. But his most intense flow experience came from acrobatic dancing on Saturday nights, so the paralysis of his legs was an especially bitter blow. Franco now works as a counselor to other paraplegics. In this case, too, the most inconceivable setback has led to an enrichment rather than a diminution of the complexity of experience. Franco sees his main challenge now as that of helping other victims avoid despair and assisting their physical rehabilitation. He says that the most important goal in his life is to, quote, feel that I can be of use to others, help recent victims accept their situation, unquote. Franco is engaged in a paraplegic, Franco is engaged to a paraplegic girl who had been resigned to a life of passivity after her accident. After their first date together, he drove his car, adapted for the handicapped, on a trip to the nearby hills. Unfortunately, the car broke down and the two of them were left stranded on a deserted patch of road. His fiancée panicked. Even Franco admits to having lost his nerve. But eventually they managed to get help, and as is usual after small victories of this kind, they both emerged afterward feeling much more confident of themselves. Another example studied by the Milan group was made up of several dozen individuals who were either congenitally blind or had lost their sight sometime after birth. Again, what is so remarkable about these interviews is the number of people who describe the loss of their sight as a positive event that has enriched their lives. Pilar, for instance, is a 33-year-old woman whose retinas became detached from both eyes when she was 12, and who has been unable to see ever since. Blindness freed her from a painfully violent and poor family situation and made her life more purposeful and rewarding than it probably would have been had she stayed home with her sight intact. Like many other blind people, she now works as an operator at a manual telephone exchange. Among her current flow experiences, she mentions working, listening to music, cleaning friends' cars, and, quote, anything else I happen to be doing, unquote. At work, what she enjoys most is knowing that the calls she has to manage are clicking along smoothly, and the entire traffic of conversation meshing like the instruments of an orchestra. At such times, she feels, quote, like I'm God or something. It is very fulfilling, unquote. Among the positive influences in her life, Pilar mentions having lost her sight, because, quote, it made me mature in ways that I could never have become even, well, oh, let's read that again. It made me mature in ways that I could never have become even with a college degree. For instance, problems no longer affect me with the pathos they used to, and the way that they affect so many of my peers. End quote. Paulo, who is now 30, lost the use of his eyes entirely 6 years ago. He does not list blindness among the positive experiences, but he mentions four positive outcomes of this tragic event. Quote, first, although I realize and accept my limitations, I am going to keep attempting to overcome them. Second, I have decided to always try changing those situations I don't like. Third, that's a good quote to have. I have decided, which is a little side note here. I have decided means a conscious decision to always try changing the situations I don't like. So if you don't like something, change it. If you don't like something, change it. Don't complain. If you don't like something, change it. That's very good advice. Wow, that's pretty profound. Third, I'm very careful not to repeat any of the mistakes I make. And finally, now I have no illusions, but I try to be tolerant with myself so I can be tolerant with others also. Unquote. It is astonishing how, for Paulo, as for most of the people with handicaps, the control of consciousness has emerged in its stark simplicity as the foremost goal. But this does not mean that the challenges are purely intrapsychic. Paulo belongs to the National Chess Federation. He participates in athletic competitions for the blind. He makes his living by teaching music. He lists playing the guitar, playing chess, sports, and listening to music among his current flow experiences. Recently, he finished seventh in a swim meet for the handicapped in Sweden, and he won a chess championship in Spain. His wife is also blind and coaches a blind women's athletic team. He is presently planning to write a braille text for learning how to play the classical guitar. Yet none of these astonishing achievements would matter much if Paulo did not feel in control of his inner life. And then there is Antonio, who teaches high school and who is married to a woman who is also blind. The current challenge is to adopt a blind child. The first time such an adoption has been considered possible in the entire country. Anita, who reports very intense flow experiences sculpting in clay, making love, and reading Braille. Dino, 85 years old and blind from birth, or Dino, 85 years old and blind from birth, married with two children, who describes his work, which consists in restoring old chairs, has an intricate and always available flow experience. Quote, when I take a broken chair, I use natural, rich cane, not the synthetic fibers they use in factories. It feels so great when the pull is right, the tension elastic, especially when it happens at the first try. When I get through, the seat will last 20 years, and so many others like him. Another group Professor Massimini and his team has studied included homeless vagrants, quote, street people, who are just as frequent in the great European cities as they are in Manhattan. We tend to feel sorry for these destitutes, and not so long ago, many of them who seem unable to adapt to normal life would have been diagnosed as psychopaths or worse. In fact, many of them have proven to be unfortunate, helpless individuals whose strength has been exhausted by catastrophes of various kinds. Nevertheless, it is again astonishing to learn how many of them have been able to transform bleak conditions into an existence that has the characteristics of a satisfying flow experience. Of the many examples, we shall quote extensively from one interview that can stand for many others. Just a side note, I used to, when I was a hospice nurse, I was a hospice nurse for over 25 years. One of my patient was a homeless a homeless person. He was a professor. I think it was a philosophy professor. I forgot which professor was it, but yeah, I took care of anywhere from CEOs to homeless people and everyone in between. So no judgment. No judgment. We all go to the same path at the end. Doesn't matter who you are. Okay. Rayad is a 33-year-old Egyptian who currently sleeps in the parks of Milan, eats in charity chickens, eats in charity kitchens, and occasionally washes dishes for restaurants whenever he needs some cash. When during the interview he has read a description of the flow experience and was asked if this ever happened to him, he answered, and this is a quote, "Yes, it describes my entire life from 1967 up to now. After the war of 1967, I decided to leave Egypt and start hitchhiking toward Europe. Ever since, I had been living with my mind concentrated within myself. It has not been just a trip, it has been a search for identity. Every man has something to discover within himself. The people in my town were sure I was crazy when I decided to start walking to Europe, but the best thing in life is to know oneself. My idea from 1967 on has remained the same, to find myself. I had to struggle against many things. I passed through Lebanon and its war, through Syria, Jordan, Turkey, Yugoslavia before going there. Before getting there. I had to confront all sorts of natural disasters. I slept in ditches near the road in thunderstorms. I was involved in accidents. I have seen friends die next to me. But my concentration has never flagged. It has been an adventure that so far has lasted 20 years, and it will keep going on for the rest of my life. Through these experiences, I have come to see that the world is not worth much. The only thing that counts for me now, first and last, is God. I am most concentrated when I pray with my prayer beads. Then I am able to put my feelings to sleep, to calm myself and avoid becoming crazy. I believe that destiny rules life, and it makes no sense to struggle too hard. During my journey, I have seen hunger, war, death, and poverty. Now, through prayer, I have begun to hear myself. I have returned toward my center. I have achieved concentration, and I have understood that the world has no value. Man was born to be tested on this earth. Cars, television sets, clothes are necessary, secondary. Excuse me. Uh, let's read that again. Cars, television sets, clothes are secondary. The main thing is that we are born to praise the Lord. Everyone has his own fate, and we should be like the lion in the proverb. The lion, when he runs after a pack of gazelles, can only catch them one at a time. I try to be like that, and not like Westerners who go crazy working even though they cannot eat more than their daily bread. If I am to live 20 more years, I will try to live enjoying each moment instead of killing myself to get more. If I am to live like a free man who does not depend on anyone, I can afford to go slowly. If I don't earn anything today, it does not matter. It means that this happens to be my fate. Next day, I may earn 100 million or get a terminal illness. Like Jesus Christ said, what does it benefit to man if he gains the entire world but loses himself? I have tried first to conquer myself. I don't care if I lose the world. I set out on this journey like a baby bird hatching from its egg. Interesting metaphor, just a side note here, interesting metaphor, because the egg is an alchemical symbol of the soul. And it is said that there's a side note, I think I said that. When you first, when a person first um, spiritually awaken, that means the egg is kind of cracking a little bit. And our goal is to crack that egg and be awakened and be a little chick. So it is said that Buddha, when he was born, physically born, he was born 8 years old. And that's not 8 years old physically, but it's 8 years old spiritually, which means he's already a highly evolved spiritual being. And when you think about it, an 8-year-old toddler is still growing, is still evolving. So that means the Buddha is still evolving. A lot of the what we call ascended masters, who are highly evolved and highly spiritual beings, like Mary, Mother of God, Mother of Jesus, Jesus Christ, the Buddha, Guan Yin. These are all ascended masters. They are evolving as well. Interesting, eh? That's one of the reasons why I chose the egg in my logo because of the alchemical symbol. So sorry, a little side note there. Okay, let me try this paragraph again. I set out on this journey like a little baby bird hatching from its egg. Ever since I have been walking in freedom. Every man should get to know himself and experience life in all its forms. I could have gone on sleeping soundly in my bed and found work in my town because the job was ready for me, but I decided to sleep with the poor because one must suffer to become a man. One does not get to be a man by getting married, by having sex. To be a man means to be responsible, to know when it is time to speak, to know what has to be said, to know when one must stay silent. End quote. Wow, this is a very profound paragraph. Very profound paragraph indeed. This is a good paragraph to put it up on like a plaque or a frame or something. Yeah. One of life's, some of life's teachings, right? Huh. Insights, insights. Okay. Riyadh spoke at much greater length, and all his remarks were consistent with the unwavering purpose of his spiritual quest. Like the disheveled prophets who roamed the deserts in search of enlightenment 2,000 years ago, this traveler has distilled everyday life into a goal of hallucinatory clarity. Oh, that is a very interesting word that the author uses. Hallucinatory clarity. To control his consciousness in order to establish a connection between his self and God. Hmm. Well, I got a little stumped there. Hallucinatory clarity. That's very interesting. What were the causes that led him to give up the quote, good things in life and pursue such a chimera? Was he born with a hormonal imbalance? Did his parents traumatize him? These questions, which are the ones that usually interest psychologists, shall not concern us here. The point is not to explain what accounts for Riot's strangeness. Hmm, interesting words that the author is using here, but to recognize that given the fact he is who he is, Rayat has transformed living conditions most people would find unbearable into a meaningful, enjoyable existence. Excuse me. And that is more than many people living in comfort and luxury can claim. Wow. Okay. Coping with stress. Quote, when a man knows he is to be hanged in a fortnight, it concentrates his mind wonderfully, unquote, or end quote, remarked Samuel Johnson in a saying whose truth applies to the cases just presented. A major catastrophe that frustrates a central goal of life is either destroy the self, forcing a person to use all his psychic energy to erect a barrier around remaining goals, defending them against further onslaughts of fate, or it will provide a new, more clear, and more urgent goal to overcome the challenges created by the defeat. If the second road is taken, the tragedy is not necessarily a detriment to the quality of life. Indeed, as in the cases of Lucio, Paolo, and innumerable others like them, what objectively seems a devastating event may come to enrich the victims' lives in new and unexpected ways. Even the loss of one of the most basic human faculties, like that of sight, does not mean that a person's consciousness need become impoverished. The opposite is often what happens. But what makes the difference? How does it come about that the same blow will destroy one person while another will transform it into inner order? Psychologists usually study the answers to such questions under the heading of coping with stress. It is obvious that certain events cause more psychological strain than others. For example, the death of a spouse is several orders of magnitude more stressful than taking out a mortgage on a house, which in turn causes more strain than being given a traffic ticket. But it is also clear that the same stressful event might make one person utterly miserable, while another will bite the bullet and make the best of it. This difference is how a person responds to stressful events has been called, quote, coping ability or coping style. In trying to sort out what accounts for a person's ability to cope with stress, it is useful to distinguish three different kinds of resources. The first is the external support available, especially the network of social supports. A major illness, for instance, will be mitigated to a certain extent if one has good insurance and a loving family. The second bulwark against stress includes a person's psychological resources, such as intelligence, education, and relevant personality factors. Moving to a new city and having to establish new friendships will be more stressful to an introvert than to an extrovert. And finally, the third type of resource refers to the coping strategies that a person uses to confront the stress. Okay, there's a few footnotes, so let us read them. Okay, all right. The quote from Johnson, when a man knows, dot, 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 is from Johnson's letters to Boswell, September 1977. Stress. Hans Selye, who began studying the physiology of stress in 1934, defined it as the generalized result, whether mental or physical, of any demand on the body. 1956, 1978. An important breakthrough in the investigation of psychological effects of such demands was the development of a scale that attempts to measure their severity. Holmes and uh, Holmes and Rahi, 1967. On this scale, the highest stress is caused by, quote, death of a spouse with a value of 100, marriage has a value of 50, and Christmas a value of 12. In other words, the impact of 4 Christmases is almost equal to the stress of getting married. It is to be noted that both negative and positive events can cause stress, since they both present demands one must adapt to. And the footnote on supports of the various resources that mitigate the effects of stressful events, social supports or social networks that have been studied the most extensively. Lieberman et al., 1979. Family and friends often provide material help, emotional support, and needed information. Schaefer, Coyne, and Lazarus, 1981. But even interest in other people seems to alleviate stress. Those who have a concern for other people and concerns beyond the self have fewer stressful experiences, and stress has less effect on anxiety, depression, and hostility. They make more active attempts to cope with their problems. Crandall, 1984, page 172. Okay. All right. Of these three factors, the third one is the most relevant to our purposes. External supports by themselves are not that effective in mitigating stress. They tend to help only those who can help themselves. And psychological resources are largely outside our control. It is difficult to become much smarter and much more outgoing than one was at birth. But how we cope is both the most important factor in determining what effects stress will have and the most flexible resource, the one most under our personal control. Two of the main ways people respond to stress. There are two main ways people respond to stress. The positive response is called, excuse me, a dry throat there this morning. There are two main ways people respond to stress. The positive response is called a mature defense by George Villant, a psychiatrist who has studied the lives of successful and relatively unsuccessful Harvard graduates over a period of about 30 years. Others call it transformational coping. The negative response to stress would be neurotic defense or regressive coping, according to these models. To illustrate the difference between them, let us take the example of Jim, a fictitious financial analyst who has just been fired from a comfortable job at age 40. Losing one's job is reckoned to be about midpoint in the severity of life stresses. Its impact varies, of course, with a person's age and skills, the amount of his savings, and the conditions of the labor market. Confronted with this unpleasant event, Jim can take one of two opposite courses of action. He can withdraw into himself, sleep late, deny what has happened, and avoid thinking about it. He can also discharge his frustrations by turning against his family and friends, or disguise it by starting to drink more than usual. All these would be examples of regressive coping or immature defenses. Or Jim can keep his cool by suppressing temporarily his feelings of anger and fear, analyzing the problem logically, and reassessing his priorities. Afterward, he might redefine what the problem is so that he can solve it more easily. For instance, by deciding to move to a place where his skills are more in demand, or by retraining himself and acquiring the skills for a new job. If he takes this course, he would be using mature defenses or transformational coping. Okay, so there's a footnote about coping here. Let's read that. Okay. Coping styles. The experience of stress is mediated by a person's coping style. The same event might have positive or negative psychological outcomes depending on the person's inner resources. Hardiness is a term coined by Salvador Madi and Suzanne Cobosa to describe the tendency of certain people to respond to threats by transforming them into manageable challenges. The three main components of hardiness, sorry, our commitment to one's goals, a sense of being in control, and enjoyment of challenges. Kabosa, Madi, and Khan, 1982. A similar term is Vallant's 1977 concept of mature defense, Lazarus's concept of coping, Lazarus and Folkman, 1984, and the concept of personality strength, measured in German surveys by Elizabeth Noel Newman, 1983-1985. All of these coping styles, hardiness, mature defenses, and transformational coping, share many characteristics with the autotelic personality trait described in this volume. I don't know about you, but it sounds like different words for the same thing. Human beings have a way of making things complicated when it doesn't have to be, or when it isn't. That's my side note. Anyways. Okay, few people rely on only one or the other strategy conclusively. It is more likely that Jim would get drunk the first night, have a fight with his wife, who had been telling for years that his job was lousy, and then the following morning or the week after, he would simmer down and start figuring out what to do next. But people do differ in their abilities to use one or the other strategy. The paraplegic who became a champion archer or the blind chess master, visited by misfortune so intense that they are off the scale of stressful life events, are examples of individuals who have mastered transformational coping. Others, however, when confronted by much less intense levels of stress, might give up and respond by scaling down the complexity of their lives forever. The ability to take misfortune and make something good come of it is a very rare gift. Oh, let's read that again. The ability to take misfortune and make something good come out of it is a very rare gift. Those who possess it are called survivors and are said to have resilience or courage. Whatever we call them, it is generally understood that they are exceptional people who have overcome great hardships and have surmounted obstacles that would daunt most men and women. In fact, when average people are asked to name the individuals they admire the most and to explain why these men and women are admired, courage and the ability to overcome hardship are the qualities most often mentioned on a reason for admiration. As Francis Bacon remarked, quoting from a speech by the Stoic philosopher Seneca, quote, "The good things which belong to prosperity are to be wished, but the good things that belong to adversity are to be admired." Mm, interesting quote. Let's read that quote again. The good things which belong to prosperity are to be wished, but the good things that belong to adversity are to be admired. Interesting, eh? In one of our studies, the list of admired persons included an old lady who, despite her paralysis, was always cheerful and ready to listen to other people's troubles. A teenage camp counselor who, when a swimmer was missing and everybody else panicked, kept his head and organized a successful rescue effort. A female executive who, despite ridicule and sexist pressures, prevailed in a difficult working environment, and Ignaz Semmelweis, a Hungarian physician who, in the last century, insisted that the lives of many mothers could be saved at childbirth if obstetricians would only wash their hands, even though the rest of the doctors ignored and mocked him. These and many hundreds of others mentioned were respected for the same reasons. They stood firm for what they believed in and didn't let opposition daunt them. They had courage, or what in earlier time was known simply as virtue, a term derived from the Latin word vir, V-I-R, or man. And there's a footnote on courage, so let's read that. Courage. The people consider courage the foremost. Oh, courage. That people consider courage the foremost reason for admiring others emerged from the data of my three-generation family study when Bert Lyons analyzed it for his PhD dissertation, 1988. Hmm, okay. It makes sense, of course, that people should look up to this one quality more than to any other. Of all the virtues we can learn of all the virtues we can learn, no trait is more useful, more essential for survival, and more likely to improve the quality of life than the ability to transform adversity into an enjoyable challenge. To admire this quality means that we pay attention to those who embody it, and we thereby have the chance to emulate them. Oh, sorry. We thereby have a chance to emulate them if the need arises. Therefore, admiring courage is in itself a positive adaptive trait, Those who do so may be better prepared to ward off the blows of misfortune. But simply calling the ability to cheat chaos transformational coping and people who are good at it courageous falls short of explaining this remarkable gift. Like the character in Moliere who said that sleep was caused by dormitive power, we fail to illuminate matters if we say that effective coping is caused by the virtue of courage. What we need is not only names and descriptions, but an understanding of how the process works. Unfortunately, our ignorance in this matter is still very great. Hmm, interesting. Okay, well, I hope you enjoyed that. We will continue our reading next week with part two. And in the meantime, I hope you guys all have a great day and check out our other book clubs. Okay, bye bye now.